By now you know the drill. Something happens in the metal realm or the realm of society around us, and I am here to respond to it per your request. Gene Simmons touched base just recently on a topic that I mentioned a couple of years ago in a video that I did called Is Rock Dead? That was responding to an article that was in the Rolling Stone that was talking about this. However, Gene Simmons, of course, is about a month removed from making some pretty ridiculous comments about suicide. So, not to say that his words mean anything more, but Gene, being the ridiculous gentleman that he is, always seems to make a big stink whenever he opens up his mouth. So, we need to talk about this a little bit. I'm not going to read you the article, because by now, I would hope that this is circulated to the point where you have seen it yourself. But I will paraphrase slightly and essentially tell you what the gist of what Gene had said really was. Gene was essentially stating that he feels very sorry for anybody who is currently jamming in a garage, because they're not going to be granted the same opportunities that he was whenever Kiss was first getting started and before Kiss became one of the biggest acts on Earth. That the person that is in that garage will no doubt never ever be able to reach their full potential, never grow, and never become a rich, lavish rock star such as himself. And it's all based around illegal downloading and the fact that rock and roll is now a dead scene. That's pretty much the gist of it. He goes on to continue talking about how all of these things are terrible. He goes on to speak nostalgically about the glory days whenever he was just getting started with the original lineup of Kiss and how they were able to jam and get stuff together. And this was, of course, before they became the band that they are now. And then speaking about how if you know someone who's downloading, it may in fact be someone that's in your band or your next door neighbor that downloads your stuff as opposed to buying it, blah, blah, blah. And that what you should do is press charges. In a nutshell. Now, most of you are probably expecting me to be ridiculously offended by this. Most of you are probably expecting that I will vehemently disagree with Gene Simmons. And probably by the nature of the way in which I'm speaking, you can tell that I probably am not going to share that opinion. It's because I don't necessarily disagree with Gene Simmons. I just disagree with some of his reasonings. And I don't think that rock is dead. I said it before, and I will say it once again. Now, the easy argument is that rock and roll isn't dead, it's in a state of dormancy. It's what a lot of people say about heavy metal. They say that heavy metal was in a period of dormancy in the 1990s, whenever grunge kind of overtook the hair metal and thrash metal that was dominating in the tail end of the 1980s. Grunge took over, killed metal, and then metal eventually rose again later on in the decade, moving into the 2000s. It's a fair point, it's a fair assessment. However, the thing of it is that during the 1990s, metal was actually experiencing a hell of a revival, not to mention a bit of an identity check. Something where the extreme scene was really starting to take its roots, take its shape, with black metal and death metal gaining a lot of momentum. And a lot of the bands that have influenced the generation that we're currently experiencing, bands such as Atheist or Cynic and things like that, were releasing landmark albums. So to say that rock is dead is a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a long-winded, kind of all-encompassing death nail, and that's where Gene and I will definitely have to agree to disagree. Principally because rock and roll is not dead. It is just in a period of time where it's not at the forefront. It's not what is the main attraction. It is not the centerpiece that is at the window that you see, on Black Friday or, the days before Christmas, whenever you think about what you're going to buy, what you're going to purchase and consume. It's not about that here in 2014, much like it was in 1974. Rock and roll right now is probably ranked about third or maybe even in fourth place, all depending on how you look at it and how you really subsection your music. If you really want to go with pop rock and R&B, and you want to put that in its own category, then it's definitely fourth. You definitely put it behind rap, you put it behind pop rock, R&B, and sadly you have to also put it behind country music as it stands today. Now there are reasons for this. There's reasons why rock music has certainly lagged behind and fallen by the wayside, and there's a couple of things that we're going to discuss about today that will really illuminate these ideas. Some of these things I've said before, but it's something that continues to be true, and it's kind of something where we need to call out rock music fans, as opposed to calling out all of the other things, all of the other factors that are really causing this to occur. Now let's consider the three things that we've talked about. We talk about pop music, we talk about country music, we talk about rap music. Pop music has a universal appeal. There have been moments in time where pop has not been at the forefront. We know this. It's always been, however, one of the styles of music that have been paralleled with rock music in popularity. Whenever you consider a lot of different things, whenever you consider what pop rock is right there in the title. It's popular rock, either that or it has a poppier sound to it. Now, this is something that's changed a lot, especially in recent times, considering the whole rock and roll idea has kind of been removed from pop, stripped from pop. It's become more vocal R&B, but still placed in the same section. Now, based around that, pop is pulled away because of a lot of commercialism. There have been some stars that have really been able to take pop to the next level in the past couple of decades. While rock has had its, moments of glory, while it's had its real, stalwarts of the genre, it has not been something that's grown as exponentially as the pop scene, especially whenever you consider the most recent 15 years or so. There have been scenes that have cropped up, such as the Nickelback theory of a Dead Man Stain scene, things like that. There have been little elements of post-grunge and other elements of rock. Indie rock has certainly exploded over the past couple of years to the point where it's no longer really independent. There's a lot of, big market sensibility to it. And these have been kind of the frontrunners, the forebearers, your Black Keys of the universe. And then you have your sleeper hits, your sleeper giants that really have become really a reason why pop rock, or rock and roll really continues to thrive. Your Foster the Peoples with a song such as Pumped Up Kicks, even though I really think that Supermodel from this year is a stronger album than Torches. You consider some of the other tracks that have come out for other groups, and it all becomes very apparent, such as Cage the Elephant, with songs such as Come a Little Closer, and others. So, the problem here seems to be that these breakout artists, these ones that have the one or two tracks that really are huge and explode, everything kind of, goes cold on them for a while, especially whenever they're in the process of making a new record. Everything kind of cools off a little bit, and then whenever the new record comes out, it really has to have a single that's equally as strong in order for consumers to give a damn. This is something where whenever the breakout single came out, they couldn't get enough of it. It was to the point where they were requesting it so damn much that other people were getting tired of it. And now that something new has come out, it's not something that generates the same element of buzz. This is the whole idea of having, a true huge single and then have it follow up with something that just doesn't have the same momentum. In pop music, it almost seems like with every passing single, the fans are coming out. Now, this might not be something that is responded by, constant #1 hits and the #1 title really being, a dogfight each and every week. There are definitely songs that break away. There are definitely songs that really take precedent. However, with rock, it's definitely a lot harder to see those songs really cross over. As opposed to a generation ago in the 1990s, where if you listen to a popular music station, you were going to hear pretty much an equal balance of pop rock and R&B music. You were going to hear Boyz II Men and Toni Braxton really whispered in the same breath with bands such as Bush or Savage Garden. So in the 1990s, there was definitely more of a blend because they were still on a very equidistant plane. That's not something that's true here in 2014. Once again, I mentioned the whole fact that rock and roll marketing, rock music marketing on the radio especially, is definitely not what Pop's is. Pop definitely reaches at least 3 times the audience, and at some locations, in some environments, it can be up to 10 times the population than a rock music station. This is something where rock fans really need to give these stations and these executives a reason to really think twice about doing this and to throw their funding more towards a rock and roll revival. It's something that has to take place because the bands that are present today have to have a strong presence. Now, whenever it comes to rap music, this is certainly something where the urban environment has always been very, very, and I mean very supportive of their artists. This is something where I have people that come into the store almost on a daily basis getting 2 or 3 different albums, and it's to the point where they can name, 10 to 12 different rappers that they really, really enjoy. And, the funny thing about it is that they'll get those albums maybe the first day, but the 20 or 30 others that they just kind of like, or that they've heard just one verse on a mixtape or something like that, they'll pick up on a later date. This is kind of what it used to be with rock and roll, where the bands that you really, really love, you pick up on release day, but then those other singles that you heard, maybe you pick it up whenever it goes on sale. Either that, or whenever there's, just nothing new that you really were thinking about, but yet you still pick it up because the name's familiar to you. Either that, or because it piques your curiosity. This is something that's not present in rock and roll. This is something where people are very unwilling to take risks. They're very afraid of something very static, something very, grayscale. They're afraid of it sounding too much like everything else that they've heard already. Whereas whenever you consider rap, it's something that really does have a very similar sound to it, especially today, especially whenever you get to a lot of the commercial rap. There's definitely a similarity to a lot of artists, even though the underground really boasts a strong, strong repertoire of talented and very, very innovative artists. The commercial ones definitely all have a similar vibe to them, and these people are still picking them up at just a breakneck pace. Country music's kind of the same way. In my opinion, a lot of country music right now, a lot of commercial country, 90% of it, in my opinion, really just sounds the same. It's something that doesn't have a lot of a breakaway point from one artist to the next. It's just a vocal difference, perhaps, but it really just seems like their lyrical content is, a dartboard of countryisms that is, established on the recording studio wall that they just toss darts at in order to accumulate their lyrics for a track. And then whenever it comes to the music, you kind of just go by the Nashville playbook. But this is still something that people can't get enough of. It's especially in areas where country music is very strong. Mine is certainly one that's an example. These are people that'll come out and buy it just because it's new, and these are people that buy it because they enjoy this stuff, because they listen to the country radio station 8 out of the 24 hours of the day. It's something that they always have on while they're doing other things. If they're cleaning their homes, if they're having a gathering, if they're eating dinner, the country radio is on. These are all songs that are very, very familiar to them. They come in with names that I've never even heard of, names that we've never even had, with songs that have not been released yet on a physical album and still are established as hot singles. Why does rock and roll not have this similar concept of need, of importance? Where's the angst in rock and roll music? Because I gotta say this, a lot of you are going to say that there's angst, and they're going to point me in directions that I'm about to shoot down, but there is not the same level of angst. There is not the same level of social awareness. There's not the same level of depth to rock music these days as there was in the past. Now you might say to me, well, Mark, in the 1970s, coverkillernation, it was certainly something where there were a lot of songs about love. There was a lot of songs about relationships, about having fun and getting high, and that was just fine. Where's the social consciousness? Where's all this crap that you're talking about? There's an angst to it. There was a feeling, a rebellion to this, considering it was going against what was, really conventional. And this was a movement that lasted for decades. Now, today, we need something a little bit more. We need some actual angst. We need something where individuals can kind of latch onto it and believe in it. The whole trite expressionism of love and being out of love and hating somebody and blah is become exactly what I've stated. It's trite. It's played out. It's been done and overdone to the point where it is making ears bleed. It's instead something where these individuals need to kind of take a look outside and write about some just random different things. Kind of just go with something that nobody would expect, and then use your poetry in order to make it really kind of not apparent that that's what you're talking about. Pumped Up Kicks by Foster the People is actually a great example. It's a song all about school shootings, but yet nobody who requested that song, with the exception of the intelligent few, were really able to point that out. in our society, if that would have become mass, mainstream, fact and knowledge, people would hate that song. People would think it's terrible. They would not want that song on the airwaves because they would think, here in 2014, that that's promoting the idea. See Exodus fan who posted lyrics on Facebook and went to jail. But we need that angst. We need that angst. We need those people that are so passionate about this. And I know that every band is passionate about what they do. I'm not taking a stab at them. But you got to do something ridiculous. You got to, really stand up for something. Everyone's just looking for the paycheck. Everyone's looking for the paycheck. They're looking for the fame. They're looking for the fortune. They don't stand for anything. They're not going after anything. They're not looking to shock people. They're not looking to, really do anything that's all of that far-fetched. It's a pretty basic idea. Now, whenever it comes to the emo, the post-hardcore, and everything like that that's trying to do it with their image, you're still not standing for anything. You're standing for trite ideas. And there's so damn many of you that the idea loses its punch. It loses its significance. Most of you are just droning on about relationships and droning on about how everyone feels so alone in life and things like that. If I want to listen about loneliness, to a song about loneliness, I'll listen to Creep by Radiohead. And I've heard that song 27,516 times and know every word by heart. I'm bored of it, but I'll listen to that over your shit. Because your shit is literal whining. Tom York's voice may sound like he's whining, sound like he's just a nasal bitch. But at least that song has a significance to it. At least that song has some depth, some dynamisty to it. At least it does not feel like every damn other song in their catalog, not to mention in the alternative rock from the 1990s universe. It has character. It has uniqueness. That's what's missing. That's where Gene Simmons is correct. These people that are able to really shred and do some wonderful things and can develop themselves as rock stars, they just don't have that same drive. And because they don't have that same drive, companies, fans, the world has not gotten behind them. Get some angst. Get some pride. Get some balls. Do something different. The Black Veil Brides wearing Kiss-style makeup is not different. Their music is not different. Falling in Reverse, any other emo band that you can name, it's a movement, but it's not one that's doing anything to help the landscape. So that movement, if it's to change rock and roll forever, it has failed. I remember in the 1970s, not personally, I was not there, but I remember people telling me about how concerts were cheaper and how records maybe were cheaper, or just the fact that everything seemed like it had a lot more punch to it. That everything felt a lot more real. And these are songs that felt very aware. I remember listening to Neil Young talking about what happened over in Ohio. Talking about what happened at that college with the shootings. You take a look to Jimi Hendrix with songs such as Purple Haze. Really is a snapshot of the acid scene, of the acid culture. Then I think of today. And I think to myself, is this really a snapshot of our culture? Is this something that is going to feel like a proverbial scrapbook of what 2014 was all about? And I would say no. I would say that there is very little out there that really provides that. And most of it is probably so under the radar that it's not going to be one that's going to be remembered by a mass number of people. It's instead going to be one that is really spoken about in hushed tones by very few individuals. And if the person that they speak about really remembers it, there'll be a camaraderie there. We as fans have just as much to do with this as the artists do. We need to demand that rock and roll be on the radio. We need to demand that rock and roll be back at the forefront. We need to demand that rock and roll rule once again. But I can understand why a lot of you don't. I can understand why a lot of you are kind of just lackadaisical to do so. Because it doesn't feel like it has that same energy, that same power, and that same punch. So if you're in a band, and you're in a rock band, then your identity and what you do, that passion that you bleed into your craft, that has to be infectious. You have to bleed that out. You need to find a way. I can't tell you how to do that. If I could, then I would do it myself. But I cannot do everything myself. But you have to find a way to channel and bleed that energy out on every song that you sing, every note that you play. Something that is infectious and that you can feel through radio waves, through the waves of a playback device, or through the waves that are exhibited and exuded throughout speakers at a concert event. You have to give these fans a reason to keep coming back. You have to give these fans a reason to avoid going to something else. You have to give fans a reason to maintain a rock and roll feel, to make them want to stay within the genre, to make them really want to become rockers, as opposed to poppers or country fans, or, fans of hip-hop. In the end, we all like different things. That's a fair assessment, and that's something that's never going to change. Am I saying that you have to like just rock music in order for rock to be revived? Absolutely not. You can have rock music revived while you're supporting all of your other favorite genres of music, heavy metal being included in that. But you have to actually put forth that semblance of effort. You have to absolutely give yourself a little bit to the rock scene. And if you want rock to come back, then you got to push for it. You got to demand it. You got to want it. You got to bleed it. Gene Simmons, you were half right. Right now it feels like rock is really dead. But the spirit is still there. It's still there, and I know it's still there because of the number of people that got pissed off by this article. The number of people that responded to it by saying, "Rock's not dead, you insensitive jackass. Go shut the fuck up or kill yourself." But if we have a spirit, that means we have life. But we need to show more than just spirit. We need to show more than just the life that we have been showing right now. Because as of right now, all that we show is that we're on life support. And we need to get off of that. We need a miracle cure. And we're the way that happens.